Hi, welcome to today's soapbox. You may be listening to this as a podcast, or you may be watching this in a video format. I did my best to make this visually accessible and also accessible for listeners. So I would love your feedback in the comments. I'm trying a different mic setup, a different recording software, a different format of content. So I'd be super excited to hear what you think, and I'm very open-minded to taking your feedback. So without further ado, let's kind of lay some groundwork for Disney's America, the vision of the USA that never was. So I'm going to start by talking about this idea of the Disney decade. So I was not alive in the 90s, so I don't know if it was hype or not, but Michael Eisner was prepared to make it hype. In January of 1990, he's like, this is going to be the Disney decade. We are going to expand, especially in parks. He was working on all kinds of entertainment options. There's like cruise line stuff going on. There's travel destinations. So he was the former CEO of Disney, and at the time he was definitely doing the thing. So some idea of kind of what was going on in the 90s. There were a couple parks that opened in 1989, and then also there's a park that opened in 2001. So the Disney decade did not stay confined to the 90s, but the projects that opened in the 90s were Animal Kingdom, which opened on Earth Day of 1998. That is within the Walt Disney World Resort. So it's the fourth park in the resort. Then there was Euro Disney, which is now known as Disneyland Paris. That opened in April of 1992. And then Blizzard Beach is a water park within Disney World, and that opened in 1995. So Animal Kingdom was a new theme park, Blizzard Beach was a new water park, and Disneyland Paris was a whole new resort. I don't know why they always release in April. I mean, there's a chunk of stuff that doesn't happen in April, but I think it's interesting how much of it is in April. I guess you gotta be ready for those spring break and summer break dollars. So one of the key pieces of the parks is there's a lot of patriotism involved. So, I mean, let's just address the elephant in the room. The American nostalgia that these patriotic elements are based on is the nostalgia of one person, Mr. Walt Disney, and he is specifically nostalgic for his hometown in the 19th century. That would be Marceline, Missouri. So you can see, if you're watching, there's a picture of what Marceline looked like. It's a street with the specific kind of facade. It's just a street. I mean, with buildings, they're 2-story, there's like retail on the bottom, detailed facades and windows and that sort of thing. And then you can see a picture of Main Street USA, which is definitely a romanticized version. It's very colorful, it's very clean. There's no traffic because it's all like pedestrians. And in the park, there's actually there's a trolley and different things that kind of go on the road, but not of the level of like an actual city. So this kind of bled into other places in the parks. So first off, Walt Disney died before Disney World got built, so he only saw the opening of one park, and that was Disneyland, the first park at Disneyland Resort. So he has kind of a very direct impact on Disneyland in a way he doesn't any other park. But within Disneyland, you can see Frontierland and New Orleans Square are both based on America. And I use the broader America here instead of the USA because the Wild West is not confined to the borders of the US. So New Orleans Square is based on New Orleans, Louisiana. There's a lot of different influences. There's Caribbean influences, French influences. There's just a really rich history there. And so they kind of designed a whole square for it. That's where you can find like Haunted Mansion. Yeah, and then there's Frontierland, which is based on the Wild West, which is more broadly like the North American Southwest, like Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, maybe, and then like the Northwest states within Mexico. And then there's Liberty Square, which is based on colonial America, and that's at Disney World. And it pretty much looks like Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and it has the Hall of Presidents, which is this like animatronic attraction thingy where they have an animatronic of every president that you like do this whole presentation about like the birth of democracy, and then they have an animatronic of every president. So trigger warning, if you're triggered by any of the presidents, they'll be there. So brace yourself, it'll be good. But it's very much romanticized. Keep in mind, this is a product. They're selling tickets. They're working on entertainment value. So that's kind of the main crux of the patriotism. And they've also, when they've done international parks, focused on like making sure there's like a patriotic element to like where that park is. So not all of the other parks have as much American theming as the ones within the US do. So they like did like manicured grass and stuff at Euro Disney that they didn't at Disneyland because they were like, oh, the French will want like topiaries. So I hope you like your topiaries. They look really pretty. So this is just some more intro. These are kind of how the parks work. There are resorts and then there are parks. So the parks are like ticketed. Buy your ticket for like $1 bazillion and then you go in and all the rides are in there. Then there's a resort which contains multiple parks, usually an entertainment district, usually some hotels. So that kind of gives you an idea of how this is structured. So Disneyland Resort opened August 17th, 1955 in Anaheim, California. It now has 2 theme parks. The first one is Disneyland that opened with the park. And then there's Disney's California Adventure, which opened in 2001. Put a pin in that. We will talk about California Adventure later because it is important to this story. There are 3 hotels, and then there's Downtown Disney, which has like a bunch of shopping. They have like last time I was down there, they had like a Jamba Juice, and which is really great because after a long day at Disney, eating the park food, sometimes you just want some fruit, and Jamba Juice is a good place for that. Not a sponsor, but they're welcome to sponsor me if they'd like to. Walt Disney World is the biggest resort. It's kind of the flagship one, even though it's not the original. It's in Orlando, Florida, specifically Lake Buena Vista. And that one opened October 1st, 1971. So that's after Disney's death, Walt Disney's death. The company is still around. It has 4 theme parks. Magic Kingdom Park, which opened with Walt Disney World. That one is kind of like Disneyland. It's pretty much just Disneyland. That's the vibe. Princesses, fantasy, that kind of thing. And there's Epcot, which is like future stuff, and also the World Showcase, which has like pavilions for different countries. I don't remember what countries. I know there's Mexico and Morocco and Canada and Norway and then some other ones. So peace and love. That one opened 1982. Then there's Disney's Hollywood Studios, which is kind of like non-princess Disney stuff. That would be how I would describe it. I don't know if that's helpful. I haven't been there since 2012, so I don't have a much up-to-date idea of what it is. Fun fact, when I was there, the movie Brave was about to come out. So they had a lot of Brave-themed stuff for promotion, which was super cool. So Hollywood Studios opened in 1989, so right at kind of the start of what would be the Disney decade. And then there's Animal Kingdom, opened in 1998. It has like zoo elements. There's like a big safari you can go on, that kind of thing. Very thoughtfully designed. I think that one's really pretty. And now it has the Avatar stuff. So you can see real animals and you can see fake James Cameron blue people. And then there's also 2 water parks. Typhoon Lagoon, opened in 1989, and Blizzard Beach, opened in 1995. Those are what we would call a half-day park. So they're not really there for you to spend, sun up to sundown there. You can probably go for like an afternoon or a morning. It's not a huge, massive thing. They had other half-day parks like River Country and Discovery Island that are like little half-day attractions. Those have both been abandoned, and they're just kind of sitting there, which is kind of creepy. And there's tons of urban exploring videos about that if you're interested. There's 31 hotels at Disney World. Those are the Disney-owned and operated ones. So they're like official Disney hotels. There are some, I believe, that are on the property that are like a Hilton situation. And then there's also Disney Springs, which is their version of Downtown Disney. It's much bigger. There's like entertainment complexes, sports, there's 2 golf courses, all of that. And then they also have a ranch. I think it's called like Triple D. It's 3 something, but I want to say it's D, like the diners, drive-ins, and dives thing. And then there's the first international park, and this one is important because it's the first one to not be owned and operated by Disney. This one was developed with Oriental Land Company. It's in Urayasu, Chiba, Japan. So it's outside of Tokyo. It's actually in Urayasu, but Tokyo market's better. It was opened April 15th, 1983. So another April opening, interestingly. There are 2 parks there, Tokyo Disneyland and then Tokyo Disney Sea. Tokyo Disneyland is like Magic Kingdom and Disneyland. It's the fantasy stuff. And then Disney Sea is like this crazy like volcano thing, like water in the middle. There's like a ton of rides, and there's like Jules Verne type stuff. It's super cool. It's a bit wild looking at that and comparing it to the other parks of that era. For example, California Adventure. The first initial opening of California Adventure was not as cool as it is now because the movie Cars hadn't come out. That's an opinion. I think Cars made that park what it is. But the level of detail between the two is incomparable. It has 6 hotels and an additional shopping area called Expiari. And there's Disneyland Paris, which originally opened under the name Euro Disney. I like to call it Euro Disney, but I know it's officially called Disneyland Paris. It opened in Marne-la-Vallée, France, and that opened on April 2nd, 1992. There are 2 parks there, Disneyland Park, which is Disneyland Magic Kingdom type vibe, and then Walt Disney Studios Park opened in 2002, and that is, my understanding is it's a lot more like Hollywood Studios in Florida. And then there are 7 hotels there, and then they have Disney Village, Val d'Europe, and Golf Disneyland, which are additional shopping areas and a golf course. Then there's Hong Kong Disneyland that opened in Penny's Bay, Lantau Island, Hong Kong. I believe that one's the one on reclaimed land. So they like filled in the land. They built it. That opened September 12th, 2005. And there is still 1 park there, and that is Hong Kong Disneyland. And there are 3 hotels. Then there's the Shanghai Disney Resort. It's in Pudong, Shanghai, China. It opened June 16, 2016. So it is the newest park by like 11 years. So you can kind of see the rate at which they were coming out. I'm going to see if I can do this math in my head. It was like 16 years gap, and then 12, and then 9, and then 13, and then 11. So there's kind of a clip to it. And then they were filling in additional gates at existing resorts along the way. There's 1 park there. It's Shanghai Disneyland. There are 2 hotels, and then there's Disney Town, which is their shopping district. And then, interestingly, another thing for you to put a pin in is Disneyland Abu Dhabi, which will be owned and operated by Marel Group. It is, it's in development. It's hard to everything is changing in that region so quickly. So this was announced in May 2025, and it's projected to open in the early 2030s. My guess it will be in the month of April, one of those years, because that feels like a common time. It is on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, which is in the United Arab Emirates. So Yas Island is like an entertainment island. So there's like a Formula One park there. I don't know which other ones, but I believe there's like between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, there's like a Legoland, a Universal Studios, that kind of thing. And Disney has been wanting in on this action. So it's unknown how many theme parks will be there. Everything is, to our understanding, in development. But again, there's a war going on. So I personally don't think Disney should be the top priority. I think ending the war is a bigger deal. So we'll see. So just to kind of put that on a map for you, here are where the parks are. You can see they're kind of spread across a similar, which one's the horizontal one, longitude or latitude? Latitude, longitude, one of those two. They're on like a similar horizontal line, except for the French one is significantly further north, which is cool. And you may see I have also marked a little red star. For my audio listeners, it is in the Washington, D.C. area within the United States. So southwest of New York City, northeast of Orlando. So just an interesting thing to note. What was going to go there? Disney's America. Disney's America was announced November 12th, 1993, and it was going to open in Haymarket, Virginia. So this is a park that you may be like, I've never heard of this. Yeah, it would be weird if you had, because it never opened. There's some knowledge available on it, and I've tried to compile as much as possible to make this interesting. But I have included some concept art, maps, that kind of thing in the video version. So if you're listening now, I would love if you could enjoy the visuals. A lot of them are also included in the article, which should release March 31st, I believe. No, not 31st. 30th. It should come out March 30th. So, anyway, let's take a look at Disney's America. Okay, so the idea for this park was to base it on U.S. history. So, Michael Eisner, CEO, went on a trip to Colonial Williamsburg and was like, oh, we could do that. Now, interestingly enough, the American Girl dolls were based on a trip to Colonial Williamsburg by Pleasant Rowland. So, Colonial Williamsburg, I guess you're doing something right. So, Michael Eisner was kind of like, oh, we could do a U.S. history park. And he traveled to a couple other sites in this development process, one of which was Mount Vernon. For those of you unfamiliar with Mount Vernon, that is the plantation that George Washington owned. There were like he owned slaves, so it was like a plantation. And now it's a historic site because it's like the home of the first president. But there's a little bit of like a uncomfortableness to the vibes because you should be made uncomfortable by slavery. Like, it's not good. And then the other site he went to was the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Now, I've been to that museum. It's a horrible feeling. Like, it's necessary to learn, and I'm very much in favor of it. I thought it was a very impactful experience. It's very dark. It's very moving. I'll never forget the room of shoes. That just that sticks with you. And then my family made the winning decision of being oh, we'll do that in the morning and then we'll go to another museum after that. So we left that museum being wow, I can't believe such horrible things happened to people. I can't understand how you would do that to a person. And then the next museum we went to was the Smithsonian African American Experience History Museum. I forget the exact name of it. What in the world? Those atrocities that were committed during the Holocaust, we did not learn enough from that. Like, there's still violence like that ongoing around the world right now, which is just horrible to think about. Like, we tend to confine it to right then, be like, oh, this happened in Germany in the 40s. And then you turn around and you go to the African American Experience Museum and you just are like, oh, people were getting lynched like not that long ago. That's horrible. So for some reason, Michael Eisner was like, that would make a good Disneyland. And he was like, they use dramatic effects to evoke emotions. We could do that. So they were like, oh, it could fit in with the greater idea of Washington, D.C. So a lot of Washington, D.C. is based around tourism and education. Like your 8th grade trip to find out about the Constitution kind of vibes. And he was like, cool, we can capitalize on that. That'll be perfect. It'll fit in with landmarks, libraries, museums, that kind of thing. And like monuments. Because, like when you're thinking what you're going to do in DC, you're like, I've already been to the Smithsonian. I've already been to the Capitol. I've already been to the library. I've already been to the Washington Monument. When is somebody going to have a theme park? And so he was like, yeah, this is a gap that needs filled. And they were not wanting to make a Pollyanna view. They wanted it to be real history. They were like, oh, don't worry. We'll address slavery. We're gonna talk about the dark stuff. So who knows? We'll see if that happened. So the budget for the park was $650 million. For reference, when Disneyland opened in 1955, they did that on a budget of like $17 million. And then when they opened the park in Shanghai in 2016, that one cost $5.5 billion. So 650 is kind of your reference point for how inflation has gone since then. And I believe the Abu Dhabi park is going to cost like $30 billion, which is crazy to think about, but it's even crazier to think about how like Elon Musk could build dozens of those. Sit with that for a second. That's a lot of money. And they were proposing to open this park in 1998. Okay. So when they did like a press conference at the location of the park, they handed out a brochure. So I think it would just be helpful to read like the vision statement for the park as they wrote. So it says, while only in the conceptual phase, Disney's America will be different from anything built previously by the Walt Disney Company. As well as offering rides and attractions for which we are famous, Disney's America will be a venue for people of all ages, especially American youth, to debate the future of their nation and learn about the past by living its history. This park will serve as the ideal complement to our nation's leading historical museums, monuments, and landmarks in Washington, D.C. Just as important, the park will also be a celebration of the diversity of America, the plurality of this nation, and of the conflicts that have defined us as a people. End quote. And, I mean, that sounds nice. I like the vibes, but we'll see. I don't know. It does feel kind of Pollyanna. It's hard to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have like fun Disney stuff, but also like you get to live the history. Now, I mean, if you're entitled to your own opinion, but I'm not like, if I'm hopping in a time machine, I'm not like, oh, I want to go live the Civil War. That's like not on my bucket list. I kind of am like, glad it's over. So, if I wanted to live in a civil war, I mean, I would start one, I'm not looking forward to this concept. I don't want to live it. So they also put a section about like special events. So here's a quote from the brochure. Disney's America is an extension of Walt Disney's desire not only to entertain and inspire, but to educate. The park will be equipped to stage detailed reenactments of significant Civil War and Revolutionary War battles. It will also have facilities to televise and uplink political debates, public affairs programs, and TV specials. The American Teacher Awards, established by the Walt Disney Company to recognize leading educators, will be televised from the site. Disney's America will also serve as the venue for symposia among leading historical groups, writers, educators, journalists, and students to discuss and debate issues of the past, present, and future. There may be an opportunity to establish a working broadcast newsroom or newspaper bureau at Disney's America so that future generations may learn more about the key roles of media in society, the importance and significance of freedom of the press. Now, end quote, that's lofty. Can you imagine being like, and live from a Disney park, the presidential debates, and then you have people like debating human rights at Disneyland? You know, like that'd be kind of weird vibes. Like they're like, let's take a break and advertise our newest Disney Channel original movie. Or then like imagine you're a politician and you're debating, you're trying to be president or governor or something, and you like look out the window and like Princess Ariel is greeting people outside. That'd be wild. Except I actually don't think Princess Ariel would be there, because I think she's meant to be like Danish. Like it's a Danish fairy tale. Can a Danish mermaid be at Disney's America? I feel like that kind of limits the princess potential. Like what princesses could be at Disney's America? I mean, Pocahontas is the only one I can think of, but we'll put a pin in that. We will discuss Pocahontas at length. But yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, would there be characters walking around meeting people? Oh man. Okay, so now you know what I'm going to be thinking about for the next week. So now let's talk about the park location. So this is also an image from the brochure. They bought land in Prince William County. I assume it's named after like an old Prince William, but I kind of like the notion that it's named after like the current Prince William, Prince of Wales right now. You know, the one married to Kate. I think that's really fun to think about, but I know it's not him. So it's, if you can see in the picture, it's right off at Interstate 66, which you can take directly from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. kind of has like a perimeter road around it, and Interstate 66 comes off of that. It's pretty close to the Dulles Airport, and then also you could get there from Washington National Airport, and then it's like near the Potomac. That's a river, in case anyone was wondering. So they bought the property from Exxon in like increments, like buy a little bit now, buy a little bit then. And they kind of continued this through like 1992. And the information about their purchase got leaked to the public. And that happened in fall of 1993. And so the public was like, oh, Disney bought property. It's kind of like when people watch to see like, oh, In-N-Out bought property. So you know there's probably going to be an In-N-Out at that spot. And people get really excited about this. So in the brochure, they wrote, surrounded by several hundred acres of green belt and stands of timber, Disney's America will occupy 1,200 acres of a 3,000-acre property in historic Prince William County, Virginia. The park will be located directly off of U.S. Interstate Highway 66 in close proximity by car to Washington, D.C. End quote. So this kind of shows that they're wanting this to be like a additional D.C. attraction. I don't think you can build a park within the bounds of D.C., so I understand why it's where it's at. It's also like barely in Prince William County, so I don't know if there's like a tax advantage to that. Anyway, just some food for thought. So one of the things about this location is part of the reason it's historic. It's right next to, drumroll please, Manassas National Battlefield Park. Woo! The National Park Service on their website for this park has it listed as where Southern victories tested Northern resolve, which means that the battles there that happened, the Confederacy won. Confederate victories. So, I mean, spoiler alert, I don't know if you're finished with the Civil War, but the Union won. So, it was about, oh my goodness, I guess we're going to explain the Civil War real quick. The American Civil War took place over states' rights, is what people will tell you. Now, I always follow that up with states' rights to what? It was their right to own slaves. The Civil War was about slavery. The Union was like, don't do slavery. And the Confederacy, the South, was like, yes, please, let's do slavery. We should be allowed as a state to have the freedom to say our state can do slavery. So I think it's really interesting that they're like, we need to protect states' rights more than we need to protect human rights, more than the rights of all the enslaved people living in the U.S. at the time. So, interesting little tea. So, the Manassas battlefield is the site of two battles. The first battle of Bull Run, and you guessed it, the second battle of Bull Run. Those are significant battles for both sides because the Confederate Army won those. And so even though the Union won in the end, it was like one of those trying moments of like, oh, what do we do? And so naturally, the idea of putting a park there had some controversy to it because the vibes are not great to do that. So one historian was like, well, at that rate, just put a theme park at Mount Vernon or put one at Normandy Beach. Like, other battle sites and history of horrible slave trade should be commemorated with a Disney park. So the community was not stoked about this idea because it could affect the site, it could affect the environment around it. It's a pretty area. I mean, if you're gonna have a battle, I mean, not a bad place to do it. And then the well-being of the community, because Interstate 66 was not like, it was not gonna be able to handle this. So everyone was like, dude, it's gonna make traffic insane. So yeah, it was gonna require support from the Virginia legislature to help get Interstate 66 ready and get them ready to handle the tourism influx. So we've talked about the park conceptually, and I'd like to take a look at the concept of how the park was going to be designed. This is my favorite part. So if this goes on kind of long, I'm going to ask you to just bear with me and just understand that I'm excited. So the first area that would serve as kind of like the main street is Crossroads, USA. It was based on like this area from like 1800 to 1850. Now, with each of these areas, I'm going to put up some concept art, and I'm going to put up a little icon. And the icon was restored in part by myself and also by my sister, R. Thank you, R. I really appreciate your help. And yeah, so a lot of this concept art comes from the brochure that was handed out at the press conference. That brochure is available at disneydocs.net. They scanned it in, and so there's several documents that I looked at from the actual events that were preserved by Disney Docs, so shout out Disney Docs. And then also WDW News Today had an article where they looked at a Disney's America booklet that was auctioned off at like a Disney auction. So that's where the icons come from. And so yeah. So I'll read off the summary for Crossroads USA. Quote, a spirited portrait of mid-19th century commerce, Crossroads USA is the hub of Disney's America, launching guests on an unforgettable journey through the vivid tapestry of American history. An 1840 train trestle bridge marks the entrance to this territory and supports two antique steam trains that visitors may board for a trip around the park's 9 territories. end quote. So it's literally Main Street, and it has a Disneyland Railroad. That's the vibe. So I think the most interesting thing about Crossroads USA is this next part. So this was not a concept that had been done before, but they were going to put hotels within the park. So, quote, visitors to Crossroads USA may live the American dream of the Civil War era, literally, by lodging amid the hustle and bustle in a themed 19th century inn with additional suites spread throughout the town, end quote. So, okay, let me just talk through this. So this would be within the park. You could stay within the park. And they would be rooms throughout the town, themed after the 19th century. Now, it says you can live the American dream of the Civil War era. What? I thought the American dream was like, get rich. Like, move here, get rich. What? My dream is not the Civil War. Can you imagine? Like, you're a refugee coming over, and your idea of the American dream is like safety and freedom and prosperity. And that's what's marketed to you. And then you see a booklet like this, and they're like, the dream is the Civil War era. And you're like, I would have stayed where I was if I wanted to live in a Civil War. Now you want me to pay money to experience the Civil War? No. I think not. Also, the hustle and bustle. Do you know what the hustle and bustle of Crossroads USA is going to be? It's not going to be like 19th century, like, oh, here we are in our dresses. It's going to be kids crying because the parade is too loud. It's going to be people eating turkey legs so loudly you can hear them chewing from your hotel room. It's going to be people trying to sleep in and rope drop happening outside and a bunch of people running in and being like, I got to get to the Civil War battle first. I want to be there at rope drop. To me, this feels a bit much. So I ask you to put a pin in that. I think we're up to 3 pins now that you're holding. So put a pin in that because we will discuss this hotel concept a little further later. Okay. Then there's President Square. That's from like 1750 to 1800. So that's Revolutionary War to like Bill of Rights-ish. So the concept art has like a really eclectic mix of people. There's like a big statue of George Washington. There's Andrew Jackson portrait. There's Abraham Lincoln and Bill Clinton. If that's not a real Mount Rushmore, I mean, Washington, Jackson, Lincoln, and Clinton. That's quite the grouping. Okay, so this is the blurb. Quote, from the struggle of the colonists and the War of Independence to the formation of the United States and its government, President Square celebrates the birth of democracy and the patriots who fought to preserve it. Through the magic of Disney's audio animatronics technology, guests may meet these American heroes in Hall of Presidents, a moving account of the making of our nation. End quote. Hall of Presidents already exists. It's in Disney World. So there was chatter about, like, are they going to move it? So every time there's a new president, they make an animatronic of that person. So you can have, like, you can go to the Hall of Presidents and see this, like, Five Nights at Freddy's smorgasbord of old people who've run our nation. With the exception of Obama, who's quite young. And so the animatronics are varying levels of creepy. Yeah. Now I'm really curious. I guess I could have Googled this. Are there 2 Grover Clevelands and 2 Trumps? Because they served non-consecutive terms. So, like, is there a blonde Trump for the first one and then like a white-haired Trump for the second one? I'm just curious. But yeah, if you want to see like a robot Bill Clinton, they have one. So if that appeals to you, that's always an option. You can go to Disney World and go see robot Bill Clinton. Next is Native America. This, oh my goodness. Okay. This would take place from 1600 to 1810. So before the establishment of the US and like 200 years of history, one land. Now, they'll condense the Revolutionary War or the War of Independence down into they'll give it 50 years. But for the native population of this land, they'll just be I don't know, we can throw all of it in, I don't know. No specificity. And also, native history extends past the establishment of the U.S. Native people exist today. Indigenous people exist today. They exist in reservations and also off reservations. They are everywhere. And also, there are massive crises and a ton of discrimination that happens against them. They are not just a figure of history, they're a figure of the present. So just keep that in mind. Here's the blurb. Quote, Native America explores the life of America's first inhabitants, their accord with the environment, and the timeless works of art they created long before European colonization. Guests may visit an Indian village representing such eastern tribes as the Powhatans, or join in a harrowing Lewis and Clark raft expedition through pounding rapids and churning whirlpools. End quote. Okay, so the concept art, they have one of the area, and there's people walking around this Powhatan village. And then they also have the ride, which is a river raft ride for Lewis and Clark. There's a lot I could say about this. So they want they want Eastern tribes that would be like the ancestral tribes of the region in which the park exists. That's super cool. I think it's cool to localize it a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's important that we realize the diversity of Indigenous people, because there's people from the Pacific Northwest versus the Southwest, different cultures, the Midwest versus the East Coast, different cultures, all native, different cultures though. So we tend to monolith a little bit. So I think getting specific by name is good. I like that, instead of being I don't know, here are the Indians, they can be no, here is this tribe. I think that makes a lot of sense. However, I don't know why Lewis and Clark is here. I thought their whole shtick was they were headed to the west. So why would they be in this area? Shouldn't they be in Oregon or something? I don't know. I think I'm reading too far into that, but I might not be. So we'll see. Next is Civil War Fort. Now, this one I don't like the name of. Can you imagine? So first off, you're in Disneyland. You're running around. You're going oh, we're going to Fantasyland. Oh, we're going to Tomorrowland. But here you're Mom, we need to go. We need to get to Civil War Fort. What? That's crazy. And this one's 1850 to 1870. They're given a whole zone to 20 years. Keep in mind, Native America, they're given the whole zone to 200 years. So, okay, here's a doozy. Quote, emblematic of our nation's greatest crisis, the Civil War Fort allows guests to experience the reality of a soldier's daily life. Inside, the wizardry of Disney's Circle Vision 360 technology will transport visitors into the center of Civil War combat. Outside, they may encounter an authentic reenactment of a period battle or gather along Freedom Bay for a thrilling nighttime spectacular based on the historic confrontation between the Monitor and the Merrimack. End quote. So, you're not going to see Phantasmic. You're going to go, or World of Color, you're going to go watch a battle. I don't want to experience the reality of a Civil War soldier's daily life. Maybe Union. But I don't want to be all right, let's be in the war. I get the appeal of Civil War reenactments. I know that's a whole thing. But if I'm at a Disney park I want to go on Big Thunder Mountain. I want to play with a lightsaber. I want to go on It's a Small World. I don't want to be a soldier. And this is a theme that comes up a lot. You'll probably hear me say, I don't want to be a soldier several times. So it's interesting. For the logo, they have like a American flag, drummer boy, Abraham Lincoln, a Confederate flag, a cannon, and a fist with like a broken chain. The fist with the broken chain kind of goes hard. But at the same time, it's kind of a weird smorgasbord of things. Okay. Next is We the People from 1870 to 1930. So like 60 years of history. Okay, quote, framed by a building resembling Ellis Island, We the People recognizes the courage and triumph of our immigrant heritage, from the earliest native settlers to the latest political refugees. A powerful multimedia attraction, We the People explores and explains how the conflicts among these varied cultures continue to help shape this nation. End quote. Now, I don't know how you do an immigration-themed zone without, like, being whack. I don't know. Ellis Island is interesting stuff. It's really moving to kind of be in that space. But I feel like replicating it not that far from the actual place is a bit whack. Like, I don't know. That'd be like if there was a mini Griffith Observatory in Disneyland and you're like, well, I could drive to real Griffith or I could go to Disney Griffith. Like, I don't know. I don't personally see the appeal. I also don't love the phrase the earliest native settlers. I don't know how you like I don't know how that works, because when I think settler, I unfortunately think like colonists, so colonial era, rather than like the tribal people of the land. So I don't know what they're getting at. But then there's political refugees. Now, Disney does not love to like get super in your face politically. So I'm like, what political refugees? Because we're also living in a time right now where there's travel bans. There are people who are political refugees or asylum seekers that are wanting to come to the US and they can't because of travel bans. Or there's people who already have come to the US and they're being deported. So it's interesting to think how this would read now. I love, though, that they wanted it to be like Ellis Island. I think that's a cute idea, and I think We the People is a cute name because then it's like, it feels unifying. So I don't know how I feel about this one, but it's interesting to think about how it would have aged. So next we have Enterprise from 1870 to 1930. So same time period as We the People. Okay, quote, the factory town of Enterprise plays host to inventions and innovations spawned by the ingenuity and can-do spirit that catapulted America to the forefront of industry. Within Enterprise, those daring enough can climb aboard the Industrial Revolution, a high-speed adventure through a turn-of-the-century mill culminating in a narrow escape from its fiery vat of molten steel. End quote. The concept art for this is weird. I think it's actually, it's cool, but I have a hard time understanding the perspective of it. Like, when I look at it, I can't tell what I'm looking at. And I think it's because I'm lacking imagination right now. It's a cool concept, but to me, this falls flat compared to, it just feels very commercial, if that makes sense. Like, it makes me feel like their view of what is important is industry rather than like We the People focuses on people. So I don't know. I think it's cool that they wanted to have a thrill ride, but I don't love the idea of it being through a turn of the century mill. Sounds kind of weird, but hey, I don't know what it would have looked like fully done, so I can't really judge it. It's really hard because I'm doing some heavy judging, but I also don't have like the entire plans for it. Okay, next is Victory Field. This is 1930 to 1945. Even smaller gap. This is 15 years. This is like Great Depression and World War II. Okay, quote, "The flight of the Wright brothers opened a new chapter in American history, bringing with it thrilling exploits and military advancements. With the assistance of modern technology, guests at Victory Field may parachute from a plane or operate tanks and weapons in combat and experience firsthand what America's soldiers have faced in defense of freedom." End quote. What? This is another one where I'm like, I don't want to be a soldier. Like, if I wanted to go to war, I would enlist. If I wanted to be a soldier, like, I would pursue that. So I don't have a strong desire to, like, operate tanks and weapons in combat. Now, it's different from, like, Toy Story Mania, where, like, you can operate, like, you can aim, point, and shoot, like, the little shooter thingies. And that's at, like, a game. But the idea of, like, in combat feels like just Disney Call of Duty. And where I struggle is, who is the bad guy? Who are the enemies we're taking down? Like, what if Toy Story Mania, you get in and they're like, "Okay, soldier, here's your gun, and here's some Russian people to kill, or here's some German people to kill, or here's some, like, I don't know, Arab people to kill." Like, the US has been to war with just about everybody. And through different eras of media, you can kind of see who the bad guys are. It's like, I don't know, they probably would have been like, this is the 90s, it probably would have been like the Russians, because like Red Scare and all of that. But then, like, when the vibes got different, would they be like, oh, we're replacing all the Russian enemies with, like, a different group of enemies? It's just interesting. Especially opening with the Wright brothers makes you think it's going to be like an aerospace themed thing, but it's really just like an airstrip type beat. I am from Seattle, so I have been I've been to the Boeing factory many times. I've been to the Museum of Flight. I'm very aware of like aerospace history, especially in context of the military, and that can be so cool to just sit and be like, wow, look how much technology developed, and like in the midst of war, how much technological advancement happened. Horrible tragedy is going on, but there is like tech coming out of it. It's just interesting to like chew on and think about. So I don't know if they would have been able to pull off that kind of thing, but I do not want to experience firsthand what America's soldiers have faced in defense of freedom. Special thank you to anyone who has served in the armed forces to defend freedom. But I'm not like jumping at the bit to feel it firsthand. I recognize that sacrifice people make, but like some people are tortured. It would have to be like, what are you gonna do, like an immersive war experience? Then again, this was all developed pre 9/11, so like, honey, you got a big storm coming. Like, there is going to be a whole new era of war and war fever in the US, like a bloodlust that kind of happens. So I don't know how this one would have aged either. It's really wild to think about it in context of 1993. So yeah. Next is State Fair. This may look familiar to you. Put a pin in that. I think we're at 4 pins now. This one is also 1930 to 1945. And quote, "State Fair celebrates small-town America at play with a nostalgic recreation of such popular rides as a 60-foot Ferris wheel and a classic wooden roller coaster, as well as a tribute to the country's favorite pastime, baseball. Amid a backdrop of rolling corn fields, fans may have a hot dog and take a seat in an authentic, old-fashioned ballpark and watch America's legendary greats gather for an exhibition all-star competition." end quote. So I guess they wanted to have baseball teams play there. Personally, I think your best bet would have been the Savannah Bananas. They're like entertainment baseball. They have Derek Klena right now, and I was like, what in the world? I didn't know this was an option. But they were just at Disneyland. I was researching for this and looking at the Disney Parks social media, and they were advertising the Savannah Bananas Day at Disneyland. So I think that would have been a perfect fit. Like a Dapper Dan's Savannah Banana baseball off. What's baseball game? You know? That'd be kind of cool. I don't hate this. I understand that they want like Midwest vibes, but personally, I think Coney Island would have been a cool theme for it. Since we're recreating bits of New York anyway, might as well do Coney Island. So this one's interesting. I don't actually have beef with that one. Okay, and then there's Family Farm, also 1930 to 1945. So I think that makes the most recent themed lands, the ones that go to 1945. I wonder if they would have expanded this further and like done like a 90s theme more recently. Like, you think about like American Girl dolls, they add new ones that are newer and newer, because things that used to be the present are now history. So I don't know if they would have continued to expand this, but then also you would run out of land at some point. Would they be like, all right, we're getting rid of Native America to put in 80s America? Like, that would not read well. I'd be like, let's get rid of immigration land and put in war in the Middle East land. Like, it wouldn't read well. So, yeah, I don't know. So, quote, offering a cornucopia of pastoral delights and insight into their production, Family Farm pays homage to the working farm, the heart of early American families. Visitors see how crops are harvested, learn how to make homemade ice cream or milk a cow, and even participate in a nearby country wedding, barn dance, and buffet. End quote. Now, this seems like a good time. Now, it's very simple. I will not be milking a cow. I'm not really interested in that. I think I've done it before, but I don't really want to anymore. But going to a nearby country wedding, barn dance, and buffet sounds like a wicked good time. It sounds expensive, because I don't know if they would be like, come on in, y'all. Come get some cornbread. Or if they'd be like, pay $30 and you can have a plate of green beans. I don't know what vibe we're going for. But this comes down to the American Girl question again. Like, when you design, like, for example, a Great Depression doll and then charge hundreds of dollars for her collection, it feels wrong. When you're doing a hardworking American family theme and you charge money to go to it, it feels wrong. So, my local zoo has a farm section, and it's real sleepy over there. I'm like, I don't want to see a goat. Show me a tiger, you know? And so I feel like this would be kind of like a Toontown situation, because I don't really see it having the same appeal as like Rip Ride Rocking on the Industrial Revolution ride. So that's kind of an idea of what the park would have been. Now let's talk about why it didn't happen. Let's talk about some of the controversies. Some of them are probably staring you in the face. Okay, so the first is the idea of whitewashing history. So we talked about what the lands were going to be, and a lot of them were talking about like experiencing war. Like, oh, you can experience being a Civil War soldier or fighting for freedom or whatever. But like Disney's is obviously not going to be like, oh man, bummer, your dad got shot in the leg, now you have to keep going. Like, it's not going to be like a real reenactment for people to experience. It's not that kind of vibe. I also think it would be weird to like have soldiers walking around like in uniform carrying the gear, like the stormtroopers in Galaxy's Edge. I don't know how that would have worked, because there's only so much you can do, because it really wasn't pleasant. You weren't going to walk through unscathed. So some of the topics they wanted to cover, like early relationships between the native people and the settlers, or the immigrant experience or any of that kind of thing, or World War II, that is not something that they would handle correctly. I think about like how many immigrants died on the boat coming to the US. They're not going to like pass out cholera and scarlet fever on the boat to like, it's like that Titanic experience where you go and they give you a name and then you find out at the end if you died or not. So anyway, you may be saying, why are you so confident Disney wouldn't handle this correctly? This was Disney in 1993. Maybe they would have handled it correctly. Here is my rabbit hole. I think this was one of your pins, so I think you can take this pin out. Pocahontas. Now, Pocahontas and John Smith are depicted in the 1995 Disney film as like romantic partners. I've also included pictures of the Disney fairy tale line of dolls where you can buy Pocahontas and John Smith together. Now, that line of dolls is all like couples. It's like, Cinderella, Prince Charming, Tiana and Naveen, Mulan and Li Shang. And they put Pocahontas and John Smith in that category. Little bit weird. We'll discuss why. I've included a picture of how they portrayed Kocoum in the 1995 film. Kocoum is like portrayed as like possessive and like the wrong choice, like the bad guy for her. So yeah, and then I also put a picture of Pocahontas and John Smith at Disneyland. They're like face characters walking around at Disneyland. Now they're based on real people. Like it's very different being like, oh, let me go get a picture with Elsa, and being like, oh, let me get a picture with Mickey Mouse, versus like, oh my goodness, it's John Smith. Can he hug my kid for a picture? What in the world? Like the vibes are just not good. So let's talk about the real Pocahontas. So first off, John Smith arrived at Pocahontas' village when he was 27 and she was about 9 or 10. So kind of not a good romantic situation. Kind of a weird ship, So there's no evidence, like historical basis for the idea that they were in love, but they definitely knew each other and they seem to be friendly. I've included etchings or engravings of both of them that were done in London. What is understood is that this engraving of Pocahontas was like one of the only depictions of her made from life. So instead of being like, here's what I think she would look like, this is one where they like, she was sitting in front of them and they made the picture. And this was like 1600s. So yeah, it does not look like the movie. So real Pocahontas married Kocoum and then they had a child, but then she was captured and forced to give up her child, and then her captors killed Kocoum. So some of that kind of happens in the movie. Like Kocoum intends to marry her, but then like he's killed. But really they were like, that was her first marriage. So then it's unlikely she saved Smith from her tribe, because the Powhatan people were not likely to have killed like their prisoners of war at the time. They weren't just being like, oh, we're gonna get you, we're gonna kill you. And Pocahontas wasn't like, no, stop, this isn't right. Like that is not really what happened. It seems that John Smith just kind of told people what was going on, and now historians are like, this dude was just yapping. So Pocahontas' real name at birth would have been Amanut, and she was known by the name Matoaka. But Pocahontas is like a name that came up as like a nickname. And so that is what she's known by in a lot of ways. So then we'll talk about, they made a second Pocahontas movie, because at the end of Pocahontas, they don't end up together. John Smith and Pocahontas is kind of like this, the one that got away. But in the second one, they portray her second marriage, which was to John Rolfe. She's brought to London and she kind of has to do the whole London thing. So while she was captive, she was baptized into Christianity and given the name Rebecca. And she married John Rolfe, who at the time was a widower. And And then a couple years later, she died. Like, they had a son, she died. They got married, and I think it's literally like 3 or 4 years. Like, got married, next year had a kid, like 2 or 3 years after that, died. I included a painting that was romanticized that's from like 1845, Pocahontas and John Rolfe. But then there's also like another painting that was done, seemingly her and their son Thomas. So, I mean, the movie is not accurate. So this idea of Native America, like we said, not like right on the money for what happened. So would Disney's attractions inspired by Jamestown and the Powhatan tribes be any more accurate than how they chose to romanticize the story in Pocahontas? And we have to keep in mind the development of this park was happening at the same time as the development of the film Pocahontas. So Pocahontas is a real specific view into how they were choosing to portray history, specifically Powhatan history. So looking at that, it's kind of like this is what the vibe would have been likely. I know the Disney Parks team and the animation team are different groups of people, but it kind of shows what the park was going for as a whole, on top of the fact that in a sequel, when they're kind of like doing the historical version where it's like it's not fairy tale, it's she shows up and it's like horrible, even in that version it's romanticized, and it's unlikely that they would have gone out of their way to make Native America like more accurate. I can't imagine like walking around the park and if it's this portrayal of Jamestown and then people dressed up as Pocahontas and John Smith from the movie show up. I would be so weirded out because it's like, that's weird. But then if they went historically accurate and a 9-year-old is walking around dressed as Pocahontas and there's like a 27-year-old dude, I'd be like, this is so creepy. Kids were going home, you know? So it kind of puts a lot of that into question. Also controversial was the location choice. So this map, took it from Wikipedia. It shows kind of the parcel they bought. It shows you where Haymarket is, and it shows you where the Battlefield Park is. So right there off the freeway or the interstate, people were concerned about the traffic, they were concerned about the site, and they were concerned about the environment. There was a lot of groups that were like, so there were different attempts to like rally the community one way or another. There was a Welcome Disney committee that was like, let's make sure Disney builds here. And then there was a group that was like, no, let's make sure Disney doesn't. So now let's talk about canceling the project. Here you can kind of see some pictures of some protests. People made some wild costumes and cool signs to protest the park. A lot of people in the greater DC area specifically were like not stoked about this. It's kind of weird, in my opinion, to throw a theme park in with like the Smithsonian museums and then like the actual government buildings. Okay, so they were like, okay, we need to rethink this clearly. So they changed the name to Disney's American Celebration. This name lasted about 6 weeks. They shifted the opening date to 1999, and they were like, cool, we'll close the parks during the cold winters, but we don't want to lose that Christmas tourism. So we'll have a small window with Christmas and New Year's that will open the park. So it'll be like a seasonal park with also like a little window for the holidays. And they were like, cool, we'll take the historical event designs, like the forts and stuff, and kind of transform it to like historical themes. So they were kind of doing some development, and they were like, who can we partner with? How can we rename the areas? They were trying. They were grabbing at nothing. I don't think American Celebration is a less controversial name than Disney's America. So I don't know. Drop it in the comments what you think about that. Which name do you like better? Which do you think is most accurate to what the project would have been? So they officially abandoned the plans on September 28th, 1994, 4 or 5 years before the park was set to open. So part of this was Disneyland Paris opened in 1992, and the Parks Department was in debt because of it. Sometimes it takes several years for these parks to be profitable. And they were looking at Disney's America was not going to be profitable, which hasn't stopped them from building parks before. But with Disneyland Paris being kind of a reason they were in debt, they weren't looking to add to that. So they were like, not a viable option. So 1994, there were a lot of factors why 1994 was not a good year. Here is a list of kind of what happened. So Disney's COO, Frank Wells, was killed in a helicopter crash in April of 1994. He was a close friend of a lot of the people on, like, high up in the Disney company, and he was instrumental to a lot of what was happening there. And his death kind of came out of nowhere and shocked people. So kind of started things off pretty bad. Then in July, Michael Eisner, the Disney CEO, had emergency quadruple bypass surgery. So he was kind of out of commission. So he had planned to tour some more sites to help get ideas, like cultural centers, and attend different events and things like that. But he had to cancel that because of his surgery. And then they cancel a park in September. And right around then, Jeffrey Katzenberg leaves his role as chairman of Walt Disney Studios. They kind of like a falling out. And then he founds DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and another guy in October. Now, this dude is behind Shrek. Shrek is a scathing review of Disney in a lot of ways. If you like gaze into Michael Eisner's eyes, you can kind of see Lord Farquaad a little bit. It's very clear that was like the through line. Shrek is making fun of Disney and the people behind it, and it is a whole different kind of animation, a really different kind of family film. So that was kind of tough on the company for Katzenberg to leave in the way he did. And then Bob Weiss was an Imagineer at the time. He was up there and he left the company. But then in 2007, he came back as like vice president of Imagineering, which is what they call engineering. That's Disney Parks for you. He came back in 2007 and then made his way up to president. So he was a very big part of the company. And then he retired a couple years ago. So 1994 had a lot going on. It was a real rough time to be trying to deal with the debt, the personal issues, the loss of wells, all of that. It was just really hard on them. So they wanted this project to kind of live on. They were like, this is not the end. So they were looking for another place to put it, because they're like, if part of the controversy is where we're putting it, we can fix that. So Pennsylvania was interested, Maryland was interested, West Virginia was interested. I put a picture of Virginia. I meant to put West Virginia. But Virginia, at the end of the day, was their number one choice. They were like, that's where we want to put it. So they didn't end up pursuing these options. They also looked into buying Knott's Berry Farm, which is it's near Anaheim. So it would have been close to Disneyland, and they were like, we can just expand the monorail. It's like a 15-minute drive, I want to say. So they just build a big monorail track, and they could have an additional park there. That did not happen. That property, when it was up for sale, actually sold to Cedar Fair, which is another theme park development company. So some of these concepts, here's another pin you can take out. They kind of translated some of these concepts into other park pieces. So a ton of it just got shifted to Disney's California Adventure. A ton of the lands in the initial version of California Adventure had a similar vibe. There was like an airfieldy type thing, and there was a backwoods type stuff. And they went for, like, for example, Grizzly River Run is like a direct copy of the Lewis and Clark ride they were going to do. So they just moved that over. California Adventure opened in 2001, so just a couple years after Disney's America would have opened. They also took like the state fair and they turned that into Pixar Pier, formerly Paradise Pier. I think it opened as Paradise Pier. I'm not sure. But now it's Pixar Pier. So it has a very like Coney Island feel to it. There's like lots of classic rides and a big roller coaster and a big Ferris wheel. So here's another pin. I think that's the third of 4 pins, so we're almost there. They did end up going through with putting hotels in the parks. So they did the Grand Californian, which is in California Adventure. It's a very beautiful hotel. And then they did Tokyo Disney Sea's Hotel Miracosta, which is in Tokyo Disney Sea. Now, I've never been to Tokyo Disney Sea, but I've been to California Adventure several times, so I'm going to mostly kind of conceptualize this in regards to Grand Californian. If you've been to Disney Sea and you are familiar with Hotel Miracosta, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. So please let me know. I would be so interested. I'm begging, frankly. So Grand Californian, you have to you check in with your ticket. I want to say at the front of the hotel. There's somewhere in there's a ticketing spot. And you can walk out of the hotel right up to the park. It's right over by Grizzly River Run. So it's connected to the theming of that area, which is very Northern California, nearly Pacific Northwesty, but more Northern California. So it's super interesting because park goers can just walk right up to it. You can just drop in. You can see a chunk of it from the park, and also from your room you can see parts of the park, which is a cool idea. For example, the Disneyland Hotel is at the end of downtown Disney. So there's a center plaza where Disneyland and DCA are facing each other, and then you can go out of that plaza down to downtown Disney, which is connected. It's all on property. And to get from the Disneyland Hotel to the parks, you have to walk through and then you're there. I want to say there's a monorail station, something like that. They have modes of transportation, but it's definitely further than Grand Californian. At Disney World, none of the hotels are in the parks, and so you have to take a big old tram. They have boats, they have trams, they have all kinds of stuff, buses. So it's a bit more of an ordeal. But Grand Californian, you just step out and you're right there. And there's a churro cart right there, if I remember correctly. Literally right there. So you can just pop in and grab a churro and be done. So I do think that innovation was good. I'm glad they did that. I think it's cool to have the hotels in the parks. However, it is $600 a night to stay there. So if you got that kind of money, good job, and I hope you enjoy your stay. So kind of in conclusion, with a heavy presence of historical sites and museums already in the surrounding areas, there was not a gap in educational coverage that needed to be filled by a Disney park. There was no big vacancy of you know what this place needs? A park. So even if there was an urgent need for a theme park, it's not clear that Disney was the best company for this concept. So even if we needed a theme park, it maybe should not have been a Disney one. When they were doing press and they were doing other projects like the film Pocahontas, they kind of showed a stronger commitment to storytelling and entertainment than to historical accuracy. Now, if Pocahontas had been a perfect telling of the history, then maybe we could have a different conversation and be like, oh, Disney is committed to history. But that's not been demonstrated. And by the way, they were talking about the park. It just was not clear that was what was going to happen. So people did not want a Mickey Mouse Pollyanna version of history in a theme park there. They were close to breaking ground and going into motion, but ultimately it stopped in late development due to controversy and criticism. Now, I want to just take my last pin real quick and talk about Disneyland Abu Dhabi. So I am curious if we will see another park cancellation. Disney's America is unique because there are other parks we know about that were developed and not they didn't do press for them the same way. there's been tons of ideas we haven't known about. There's been plenty of hotels announced and bought land for and all of that, and then canceled. But Disney's America kind of stands out as a big park with a reasonable amount of development. Like they had a studio thing in Gainesville, Virginia, where you could go and like learn. They had like the scale model where you could go kind of see what the place was going to be to help get the community into it. So it was very far along, and I'm wondering if this kind of thing will happen with Disneyland Abu Dhabi. So controversy has mounted about the choice to place a park in the United Arab Emirates, especially given the human rights concerns there that would prevent a diverse range of Disney fans from visiting safely. Some Disney films have been previously banned in the region due to their inclusion of LGBTQ plus themes or characters, so it's unclear how Emirati law could affect the way the park is made. So, the way to kind of, I guess, I don't know how to tackle this fully. There are strict censorship laws in like Saudi Arabia, for example, and United Arab Emirates. Those countries border each other for reference. And there are a lot of Disney films that are not shown there because they explore LGBTQ themes. Now, when I say LGBTQ theme, I literally mean a character in passing can refer to having a same-sex partner, and that will get the film removed. It's like, it doesn't have to be like an on-screen kiss or some demonstration of sexuality. It can literally be them being shown as partners. In Across the Spider-Verse, which is not a Disney film, it is a Sony film, there is a brief little piece where you can see that Gwen has a flag, a Trans Lives Matter flag, up, like a little tiny one, up on her wall. That seems to be the reason that film was banned in certain countries. So given that there's a high prevalence of queer Disney fans, they're like, I don't know. Okay, let me talk this through. When I first saw this park announced, I saw a lot of people in the comments of like the Instagram post being like, well, this is going to be one I can't go to. Like, I can't. It's either unaffordable or I can't be there because of my sexuality and the rules of the land. I went back to look for these comments and they're mysteriously gone. I wonder why. So I just think it's interesting. There's a lot of people that do travel content that go to all the Disney parks. There was a time in my life where that was a bucket list thing, go to every Disney park. But now I'm like, I can't afford that. That's a lot of money. It's getting to a point where it's cheaper to go to Tokyo Disney and fly and stay and go there than it is to go to Florida, to the Disney World of Florida. It's just kind of a lot. So Disney alienates a subset of their fans. And they've already kind of done this a little with the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel Live, having that be removed from the air by ABC, which is a part of Disney. People were outraged that that was affecting their freedom of speech and expression for things to be removed from air based on, public pressure and things like that, or political pressure. So I don't know, with the ongoing war that seems to be no end in sight, it raises a lot of questions about how far can they develop a park like this, and then also how feasible can it be with the way the Emirati government works. So we'll see. If they cancel the park, maybe I'll talk about it. But it's just interesting to think they only have one park announced right now. There's not additional parks planned for other resorts, but this will be a whole new resort and park. So it'll be interesting to see if this kind of thing happens again. Yeah. So that is the end. Thank you for watching or listening. I would really appreciate if you would like and subscribe or comment or follow or whatever, because I put a lot of hours into this, and it's been a long, stressful week, and I'm very proud of what I've made, and I just would like to have a compliment. Like, if you could compliment me, that would mean the world to me. Or if you have something negative you want to say, if you say it nicely, I'd love to hear it. Is there something you think I could change? Is there information you want to correct? Is there an experience you want to share? So I appreciate you being here. If you've made it this far, that is very noble of you, but it may be time for us both to go touch some grass. So I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.